I'd like to talk about how pension liability is computed for South Georgia. Our annual conference has 3 pension plans currently in effect for pastors who served in the South Georgia Conference: the Pre-82 Plan, the Ministerial Pension Plan, MPP, and the Clergy Retirement Security Program, CRIS. Pre-82 is for years of service up to December 31st of 81. MPP covers those years between 82 and 2006. CRIS covers years of service beginning in January of 2007. Each plan has its own assets, its own liabilities. The assets and liabilities for each plan relating to the clergy years of service within the annual conference are used to calculate overall pension liability for the conference. Those liabilities get recalculated each year so that we can keep abreast of changes related to investment earnings and losses, deaths, and years of service earned. Now remember, the liabilities are the total needed to keep the promises to pay a pension as long as the claimant lives. There are assets invested to help keep that promise and estimates on what those assets should earn over the years before they're needed to make a payment. However, if people live longer than expected, or the assets do not earn what was expected, the resulting shortfall would have to be paid. That potential shortfall can be estimated. As of January 1 of 2018, our most recent calculation, the South Georgia Conference has liabilities in both MPP and in CRISP. The Ministerial Pension Plan has a potential liability of $11,458,379. The CRISP program has a potential liability of $18,234,710. You'll note that we do not count a liability in the Pre-82 plan. We have funding committed to that plan in excess of what is currently needed. Because those funds are available if we had to draw upon them, we do not count this as a liability. So who decides what a departing church should pay? The General Conference put this responsibility on the annual conference. The Conference Board of Pensions determined that this is a matter for the entire annual conference to decide, not just the Board of Pensions. While we are recommending a formula, we believe every church should have a say in this matter. The Conference Board of Pensions considered a variety of different ways to calculate a local church's portion of the overall conference liability. You can read about the various options we considered on the website. Because the pension liability was accrued based on salaries paid over a span of years, the Conference Board of Pensions recommends that a local church's share of the overall liability be determined using the church's compensation amounts over the years as the main component. We'll use the same methods WEFPATH uses in calculating pension liability. Because this is important for all of us to understand, I do want to take some time to go over the details with you. We will spot 7 data points: 1990, 1995, 2000, 2005, 2010, 2015, and 2019. These will represent pension liability accrued over multiple pastoral appointments for each local church. We'll use the most recent actuarial report from WEFPATH, which was 2018, to determine the overall conference pension liability. Using the statistical tables and other sources, we'll calculate the salary plus housing for appointed clergy at each church in those years and determine what percentage that is of the combined salary plus housing for all churches still in existence. For 2019 and 2015, we use actual housing when it is provided in lieu of parsonage. For all other years, when a parsonage is provided, we'll add 25% of the salary for the housing figure, the same methods used by WEFPATH in calculating pensions, except for 1990. The percentage they used then was 20%, and we'll follow that. If churches have merged, we will use the highest planned compensation figure for the individual churches in those years before the churches merged. We'll average those percentages to get a decimal for the church over the 7 data points. Then we'll multiply the conference's overall share of the pension liability by that decimal to arrive at the church's portion of the overall liability. Liabilities will be figured separately for each pension plan. If no liability exists, no fee will be charged. A church will pay their share of the liability in full before exiting the annual conference. The Conference Board of Pensions will keep those funds received in execution of this policy in a separate fund, which will be restricted to use only in meeting pension obligations. These funds will be invested with Westpath in the Multiple Asset Fund. What happens if a departed church returns to the annual conference in a future year? They're due a rebate on any funds paid in execution of this policy at the time they departed, less any funds paid out to cover pension obligations. Investment earnings and loss shall be calculated as of the date of reentry, and the pro rata share refunded to the church within 6 months of its reentrance to the annual conference. Your Conference Board of Pensions recommends a formula that divides the liability on the same basis the liability was created, which is based on pastoral compensation over the years. We want you to note, no church has to pay these amounts unless they wish to disaffiliate from our annual conference. We truly do believe that we are now and should remain alive together in Christ.